The relationship between a narcissist and an empath is often a complex and painful cycle. It usually begins with intense admiration and affection, followed by emotional devaluation, and eventually, the inevitable discard. At first, the narcissist sees the empath as someone who can fulfill their endless need for attention, validation, and emotional support. This phase, known as love bombing, is marked by overwhelming affection, grand romantic gestures, and the illusion of a perfect connection. During this stage, the empath often feels an intense emotional bond with the narcissist. They believe they have found someone who truly understands and values them. However, what the empath does not realize is that this affection is not genuine. It is a calculated strategy used by the narcissist to secure a source of emotional supply. For the narcissist, relationships are not about mutual love or understanding. They are about power, control, and manipulation. As the relationship progresses, the narcissist's behavior changes. The once loving and attentive partner becomes cold, critical, and distant. The empath, confused by this sudden shift, tries harder to please the narcissist, hoping to return to the perfect relationship they experienced at the beginning. But no matter how much the empath gives, it is never enough. The narcissist begins to devalue them, criticizing their flaws, invalidating their feelings, and making them question their reality. This psychological manipulation, known as gaslighting, leaves the empath feeling powerless and confused. Eventually, when the narcissist decides that the empath no longer serves their needs, they discard them. This discard can be abrupt and brutal, leaving the empath heartbroken and questioning their worth. The narcissist may disappear without explanation, seek out new sources of supply, or blame the empath for the relationship's failure. For the empath, this rejection is deeply painful, as they are left to pick up the emotional pieces while the narcissist moves on as if nothing happened. However, the story rarely ends here. Despite discarding the empath, the narcissist often returns to revalue them. This phase is not driven by love or regret. It is a strategic move to regain control and replenish their emotional supply. Once the narcissist realizes that the empath is still vulnerable, they reappear, hoping to manipulate them once again. Revaluation occurs because narcissists view people as objects rather than individuals with their own thoughts and feelings. To them, an empath is not a person to be loved. They are a resource to be exploited. After discarding the empath, the narcissist often discovers that new sources of supply are not as satisfying. No one else is as patient, compassionate, or willing to endure their abuse. When they recognize this, they attempt to return to the empath, believing they can reclaim the emotional energy they once drained. When a narcissist revalues the empath, they employ a variety of manipulative tactics. They may reach out with messages of regret and nostalgia, attempting to stir up the empath's feelings. This behavior, known as hoovering, is designed to suck the empath back into the relationship. The narcissist might apologize, claim to have changed, or say they cannot live without the empath. These words are calculated to break down the empath's defenses and reignite the emotional connection. Another common tactic is the return of love bombing. Just like in the beginning, the narcissist may shower the empath with affection, gifts, and promises of a better future. They paint a picture of a changed person, someone who has learned from their mistakes and is now ready for a healthy relationship. For the empath, who still cares deeply, these gestures can be incredibly persuasive. The hope that the narcissist has changed can be overwhelming, leading the empath to open the door once again. However, the harsh truth is that narcissists rarely change. Their personality is rooted in a deep-seated sense of entitlement and a lack of empathy for others. The return of a narcissist is not about genuine love. It is about regaining power. Once the narcissist feels secure in the relationship again, the cycle of abuse resumes. The kindness and affection fade, replaced by the same patterns of devaluation and control. The empath, caught between their emotions and the reality of the narcissist's manipulation, faces an internal battle. They may feel torn between the desire to believe in the narcissist's promises and the painful memories of past abuse. This emotional confusion is precisely what the narcissist relies on to maintain their hold. They know that empaths are naturally forgiving and compassionate, making them easy to manipulate. Recognizing the signs of revaluation is crucial for the empath's emotional safety. Narcissists often use subtle cues to test whether the empath is still vulnerable. They might send casual messages, express curiosity about the empath's life, or use mutual friends to re-establish contact. If these attempts succeed, the narcissist gradually increases their efforts to regain control. To protect themselves, empaths must establish firm boundaries. The most effective strategy is implementing no contact, cutting off all communication with the narcissist. This means blocking their phone number, unfollowing them on social media, and avoiding any form of indirect contact. No contact is not about punishment. It is a necessary step for the empath to heal and reclaim their emotional independence. If no contact is not possible, such as in cases where co-parenting or professional obligations exist, gray rocking is another effective method. This involves giving the narcissist as little emotional reaction as possible. By becoming emotionally unresponsive, the empath denies the narcissist the validation they seek, making them less appealing as a target. Healing from narcissistic abuse is a long and challenging journey. Empaths must focus on rebuilding their self-esteem and understanding that they are not responsible for the narcissist's behavior. Therapy, support groups, and self-reflection can help the empath process their trauma and break free from the toxic cycle. One of the most important realizations for an empath is that they cannot fix the narcissist. No amount of love, patience, or understanding can change someone who refuses to take accountability. Accepting this truth allows the empath to release the hope that the narcissist will become the person they once pretended to be. Moving forward means prioritizing self-care and establishing relationships based on mutual respect and kindness. While the narcissist may attempt to return, the empath can choose to protect themselves and refuse to re-enter the cycle. True healing comes from recognizing one's worth and refusing to settle for a relationship built on manipulation and control. The narcissist will always attempt to revalue the empath, but the empath holds the power to break free. By choosing themselves over the illusion of love, they can reclaim their life and create a future where they are valued for who they truly are. When the narcissist discards the empath, it might seem like the end of the relationship. The sudden and often cruel rejection can leave the empath feeling devastated and confused. However, what many empaths don't realize is that the discard is usually temporary. The narcissist often returns, seeking to revalue the empath, but their motives are never about genuine love or remorse. Instead, their return is rooted in a deep need to maintain control and secure a reliable source of emotional supply. At the core of a narcissist's personality is a fragile sense of self that requires constant external validation. They are emotionally dependent on others to reflect back an image of themselves that reinforces their superiority and self-worth. This need for validation is known as narcissistic supply, and empaths are often the perfect source. Empaths, by nature, are deeply compassionate, loyal, and willing to sacrifice their own needs to support others. This makes them highly attractive to narcissists who seek someone they can manipulate without much resistance. When a narcissist discards the empath, it is often because they have found a new source of supply, or because the empath has begun to challenge their behavior. Narcissists thrive in relationships where they hold the power, and any sign of independence from the empath threatens that dynamic. Once the narcissist feels the empath is no longer as easy to control, they discard them, sometimes suddenly and without explanation. This act of discarding is not just about ending the relationship. It is also a way for the narcissist to assert dominance and punish the empath for no longer meeting their needs. However, the discard is rarely permanent. After some time, the narcissist often starts to revalue the empath. This happens for several reasons, most of which are rooted in their emotional dysfunction and inability to form genuine connections. One of the primary reasons for revaluation is that the narcissist struggles to find new sources of supply that match the empath's loyalty and emotional availability. While the narcissist may engage with other people after the discard, these new relationships often lack the depth and devotion that empaths provide. In many cases, the narcissist underestimates the value of the empath until they are gone. Narcissists often view their partners as replaceable during the discard phase, believing that they can easily find someone else to fill the void. However, as time goes on, they realize that not everyone is willing to tolerate their abusive behavior. The empath's unique ability to give without expecting much in return makes them difficult to replace, and this realization often triggers the narcissist's desire to return. Another reason narcissists revalue empaths is their need to maintain a sense of control. For the narcissist, relationships are about power dynamics rather than emotional connection. When an empath begins to move on, heal, or establish boundaries, it threatens the narcissist's sense of superiority. The thought of losing their influence over the empath is intolerable. This fear drives the narcissist to re-engage and attempt to pull the empath back into the cycle of manipulation. When a narcissist returns to revalue the empath, they often use a range of manipulative tactics to regain control. One of the most common tactics is hoovering, a term used to describe how narcissists suck their former partners back into the relationship. Hoovering can take many forms, including sending unexpected messages, apologizing for past mistakes, or pretending to be in emotional distress. The goal of hoovering is to create an emotional response that makes the empath vulnerable to re-engagement. During the revaluation phase, the narcissist may also revert to love bombing. This mirrors the beginning of the relationship when the narcissist overwhelmed the empath with affection, attention, and promises of a perfect future. By reviving these behaviors, the narcissist hopes to make the empath doubt their previous experiences of abuse. The empath, who may still feel emotionally connected, becomes more likely to believe that the narcissist has changed and that the relationship can be salvaged. Another manipulative tactic is playing the victim. Narcissists are skilled at twisting the narrative to make themselves appear helpless or misunderstood. They might claim to be struggling without the empath, express regret for their actions, or even blame their abusive behavior on external circumstances. This manipulation exploits the empath's natural compassion, making it difficult for them to maintain boundaries. The revaluation process is not driven by genuine remorse or a desire to repair the relationship. Instead, it is a calculated attempt to regain access to the empath's emotional energy. Narcissists do not see their partners as equals with their own needs and feelings. They view them as tools to be used for their own benefit. Once the narcissist feels they have successfully reclaimed control, the cycle of abuse resumes. The kindness and affection fade, and the empath finds themselves once again trapped in a pattern of emotional devaluation. For empaths, recognizing the narcissist's motives during the revaluation phase is crucial for breaking free from the toxic cycle. It can be difficult to accept that someone they love is incapable of genuine change, but understanding the narcissist's behavior allows the empath to protect themselves. One of the most important steps is to recognize the red flags that signal the narcissist's attempt to re-engage. These may include sudden contact after a long silence, excessive flattery, or attempts to evoke guilt or pity. Setting firm boundaries is essential in resisting the narcissist's attempts at revaluation. This often requires cutting off all forms of communication, a practice known as no contact. No contact means blocking phone numbers, unfollowing on social media, and avoiding any environment where the narcissist may attempt to reach out. For many empaths, this is a challenging but necessary step to reclaim their emotional independence. If maintaining no contact is impossible, such as in cases of shared responsibilities like co-parenting, empaths can use a strategy called gray rocking. This involves giving the narcissist minimal emotional responses, making interactions as dull and unemotional as possible. By refusing to engage in emotional reactions, the empath denies the narcissist the supply they seek, which often causes them to lose interest. Healing from narcissistic abuse is a long and complex process, but it begins with recognizing the pattern of manipulation and choosing to prioritize self-care. Empaths must work on rebuilding their self-esteem, understanding that they are not to blame for the narcissist's behavior. Therapy, self-reflection, and supportive relationships can provide the necessary tools to recover and break free from the narcissist's influence. One of the hardest truths for an empath to accept is that the narcissist's return is not about love, it is about control. No matter how convincing their words or gestures may seem, the narcissist's core motivation is always self-serving. By accepting this reality, empaths can free themselves from the false hope that the narcissist will ever truly change. Moving forward means choosing oneself over the illusion of love. It means understanding that true love is based on mutual respect, empathy, and emotional security, qualities that a narcissist is fundamentally incapable of providing. The narcissist may always attempt to revalue the empath, but the empath has the power to say no and reclaim their life. In the end, breaking free from the narcissist's cycle is not just an act of survival, it is an act of self-love. Empaths deserve to be in relationships where they are valued for who they are, not exploited for what they can provide. By recognizing their worth and setting firm boundaries, they can create a future where they are no longer trapped in the destructive cycle of narcissistic abuse. When the narcissist revalues the empath after discarding them, the cycle of manipulation begins again. But this time, the empath may find themselves even more deeply entangled. The return of the narcissist is often confusing and emotionally overwhelming for the empath, especially if they still hold on to the hope that the narcissist can change. However, it is essential to understand that the narcissist's motivations are never rooted in genuine love or remorse. Instead, their revaluation is a calculated attempt to regain control and secure a reliable source of emotional supply. One of the most dangerous aspects of the revaluation phase is how convincing the narcissist can be. After the discard, the empath may have spent weeks or months trying to make sense of what happened, questioning their worth, blaming themselves, and wondering if they could have done something differently. This emotional vulnerability makes them an easy target when the narcissist decides to return. By the time the narcissist reaches out again, the empath is often longing for closure or validation, which the narcissist uses to their advantage. Narcissists are master manipulators, capable of adapting their behavior to achieve their desired outcome. When they revalue the empath, they often present a version of themselves that appears to be transformed. They may acknowledge their past mistakes, express deep regret, and make promises of change. This false accountability is a powerful tool because it speaks directly to the empath's desire for connection and healing. However, these apologies are not genuine. They are part of the narcissist's strategy to re-establish dominance. The empath, who is naturally compassionate and forgiving, is more likely to believe that the narcissist is capable of transformation. They may interpret the narcissist's return as a sign of emotional growth, hoping that the love they once shared can be restored. Unfortunately, this belief only deepens the empath's emotional investment, making it harder to recognize the manipulation at play. The narcissist knows exactly which emotional buttons to push, exploiting the empath's kindness and loyalty to secure their place back in the empath's life. One of the most insidious tactics the narcissist employs during revaluation is future faking. This involves making grand promises about the future, talking about marriage, starting a family, or building a life together. These promises are not made out of genuine intention but are designed to keep the empath emotionally hooked. By painting a picture of an ideal future, the narcissist taps into the empath's hope and dreams, creating a powerful emotional bond that is difficult to break. Another manipulation tactic is triangulation. If the narcissist has moved on to a new partner during the discard phase, they may subtly or overtly compare the empath to their new source of supply. This can be done in a way that makes the empath feel special, such as saying, "No one understands me the way you do," or "I made a mistake leaving you." Alternatively, they may use triangulation to evoke jealousy or insecurity, creating competition between the empath and their new partner. Both approaches are designed to reinforce the narcissist's power while destabilizing the empath's sense of self-worth. During the revaluation phase, the narcissist may also play on the empath's guilt. They might claim that they are suffering without the empath, describing their emotional pain in a way that makes the empath feel responsible for their well-being. This guilt-tripping is particularly effective on empaths, who are naturally attuned to the feelings of others. The narcissist knows that by positioning themselves as a victim, they can elicit feelings of obligation and responsibility, drawing the empath back into their grasp. The emotional turmoil caused by the narcissist's return is often compounded by cognitive dissonance. This psychological phenomenon occurs when a person holds two conflicting beliefs simultaneously. In the case of the empath, they may remember the pain and abuse they experienced during the relationship, but they also want to believe that the narcissist is capable of change. This internal conflict can create immense confusion, making it difficult for the empath to make rational decisions. As the narcissist continues their revaluation, the empath may begin to question their own reality. This is a direct result of gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation designed to make the victim doubt their perceptions and memories. The narcissist might deny past abuse, downplay their harmful behavior, or accuse the empath of being overly sensitive. Over time, this constant invalidation erodes the empath's confidence and makes them more dependent on the narcissist's version of reality. One of the most painful aspects of the revaluation phase is the push-pull dynamic. The narcissist alternates between idealizing and devaluing the empath, creating an emotional roller coaster that is both addictive and destabilizing. When the narcissist is loving and attentive, the empath feels validated and hopeful. But when the narcissist becomes cold and dismissive, the empath is left desperate for the return of their affection. This cycle of reward and punishment reinforces the empath's emotional dependency, making it increasingly difficult to break free. Despite the emotional pain, many empaths remain trapped in the narcissist's web because of the psychological bond known as trauma bonding. This occurs when periods of abuse are interspersed with moments of affection, creating a powerful emotional attachment. The brain becomes conditioned to associate the narcissist with both pain and relief, making it hard to walk away, even when the relationship is clearly toxic. Breaking free from the narcissist's cycle requires the empath to recognize that the narcissist's behavior is not about love, it is about control. True love does not involve manipulation, deception, or emotional abuse. It is built on mutual respect, trust, and empathy, qualities that narcissists are fundamentally incapable of providing. Accepting this reality is a painful but necessary step toward healing. To protect themselves, empaths must prioritize their own emotional well-being. Establishing and maintaining firm boundaries is essential in resisting the narcissist's attempts to re-engage. This means cutting off all communication through no contact whenever possible. No contact is not an act of cruelty. It is a form of self-preservation. By removing the narcissist's ability to manipulate and influence their emotions, the empath can begin to reclaim their sense of self. In cases where no contact is not feasible, such as co-parenting or shared responsibilities, the gray rock method can be an effective tool. By becoming emotionally unresponsive and refusing to engage in the narcissist's drama, the empath can minimize their exposure to further manipulation. The goal is to present as boring and indifferent as possible, which reduces the narcissist's interest in maintaining control. Healing from narcissistic abuse is not a linear process. It requires time, self-compassion, and support. Engaging in therapy or support groups can provide the empath with the tools and validation needed to rebuild their life. Journaling, mindfulness practices, and establishing healthy relationships can also aid in the healing journey. Most importantly, the empath must learn to trust their intuition again and recognize that they deserve a relationship grounded in love and respect. Ultimately, the narcissist's revaluation is not a reflection of the empath's worth. It is a testament to their strength and compassion. The fact that the narcissist seeks to return only underscores how valuable the empath's love and empathy truly are. However, the empath does not need to accept the narcissist back into their life. By choosing themselves and embracing their own healing, they can break free from the cycle and create a future where they are no longer a source of supply for someone else's ego. The narcissist may always attempt to revalue the empath, but the empath holds the power to say no and reclaim their freedom. When the narcissist revalues the empath, it often initiates a dangerous psychological game, one where the narcissist's goal is to regain control while the empath is left struggling to distinguish between reality and illusion. This phase is particularly harmful because it taps into the empath's deep emotional vulnerabilities, exploiting their desire for love, validation, and closure. To fully understand why the narcissist revalues the empath, we must examine the psychological mechanisms at play and the emotional consequences for the empath who becomes ensnared in this manipulative cycle. One key reason narcissists revalue empaths is that they view relationships through the lens of ownership, not genuine emotional connection. To a narcissist, the empath is not seen as a separate individual with their own feelings and needs, but rather as an extension of themselves, a possession to be used for emotional supply. When the narcissist discards the empath, they do so with the belief that they can return at any time and reclaim what they consider theirs. This sense of entitlement fuels the revaluation process, especially if the empath begins to show signs of moving on or establishing independence. The narcissist's fragile ego cannot tolerate the idea of losing control. For them, the discard is never truly final. It is merely a pause in the manipulation. If the empath starts to rebuild their life or finds happiness without the narcissist, it triggers a narcissistic injury, which is a deep psychological wound to their self-image. This injury compels the narcissist to re-engage with the empath, not because they care, but because they cannot bear the thought of losing their power. When the narcissist initiates revaluation, they often employ a series of emotional hooks to lure the empath back into the relationship. One of the most effective hooks is nostalgia. The narcissist may remind the empath of the good times they shared, evoking memories of happiness and connection. They might say things like, "I miss the way we used to laugh together," or "No one understands me like you do." These carefully crafted statements are designed to trigger an emotional response, making the empath long for the idealized version of the relationship. Another powerful hook is the illusion of unfinished business. The narcissist often leaves the relationship without providing closure, which keeps the empath emotionally tethered. When they return, they exploit this lack of resolution by suggesting that the relationship deserves another chance. Phrases like, "We owe it to ourselves to try again," or "I can't stop thinking about you," create a false sense of hope that the relationship can be repaired. This tactic preys on the empath's desire for understanding and completion, making it difficult to walk away. The narcissist also leverages emotional mirroring during the revaluation phase. Emotional mirroring involves reflecting the empath's deepest desires and values to create the illusion of compatibility. If the empath values loyalty, the narcissist will emphasize their commitment. If the empath craves emotional depth, the narcissist will pretend to be vulnerable. This mimicry is not genuine. It is a calculated performance designed to manipulate the empath's emotions and rebuild their trust. For the empath, the narcissist's return can be profoundly confusing. On one hand, the empath remembers the pain of the abuse and the emotional turmoil caused by the discard. On the other hand, they are drawn to the idealized version of the narcissist who appears to be remorseful and willing to change. This internal conflict creates a state of cognitive dissonance, where the empath simultaneously holds two opposing beliefs: that the narcissist is both harmful and capable of love. This mental and emotional tug-of-war weakens the empath's ability to make clear decisions, leaving them vulnerable to further manipulation. The emotional intensity of the revaluation phase is further amplified by trauma bonding. This psychological bond forms when cycles of abuse are interspersed with moments of affection and reward. Each time the narcissist alternates between kindness and cruelty, the empath's brain releases chemicals like dopamine and oxytocin, neurotransmitters associated with pleasure and attachment. Over time, the empath becomes chemically addicted to the narcissist's approval, making it extraordinarily difficult to break free. One of the most harmful consequences of trauma bonding is that it distorts the empath's self-perception. The constant push-pull dynamic erodes their self-worth, leading them to believe that they are only valuable when the narcissist approves of them. This false belief can cause the empath to tolerate increasingly abusive behavior in the hopes of reclaiming the love and validation they once felt. The narcissist, aware of this emotional dependency, continues to exploit it for their own gain. During the revaluation phase, the narcissist also uses intermittent reinforcement to strengthen their hold over the empath. This psychological principle suggests that rewards given unpredictably are more powerful than consistent reinforcement. The narcissist may alternate between affection and indifference, keeping the empath emotionally invested in the hope that things will improve. This unpredictability creates a psychological craving, making the empath desperate for the narcissist's love and approval. Despite the emotional devastation, many empaths remain trapped in the revaluation cycle because they fear abandonment. The narcissist often exploits this fear by implying that the empath is unworthy of love without them. Statements like, "No one else will ever love you the way I do," or "You'll never find someone who understands you," are designed to shatter the empath's confidence and make them believe that leaving is impossible. This psychological manipulation fosters a sense of dependency, where the empath feels powerless to escape. Breaking free from the narcissist's revaluation requires the empath to recognize that the narcissist's actions are not about love. They are about power and control. True love does not involve manipulation, deception, or emotional abuse. It is built on mutual respect, trust, and emotional safety, qualities that a narcissist is fundamentally incapable of providing. Once the empath accepts this reality, they can begin to reclaim their power and break the cycle of abuse. The first step toward freedom is establishing firm boundaries. Boundaries are a declaration of self-respect and a necessary tool for protecting one's emotional well-being. For many empaths, implementing no contact is the most effective way to sever the narcissist's influence. No contact means cutting off all communication, blocking phone numbers, emails, and social media, to prevent the narcissist from re-engaging and manipulating their emotions. If no contact is not possible, the empath can use the gray rock method to minimize emotional engagement. This strategy involves becoming as unresponsive and emotionally neutral as possible, making interactions with the narcissist dull and uninteresting. By refusing to react to provocation, the empath denies the narcissist the emotional supply they crave, weakening their hold over time. Healing from narcissistic abuse is a long and challenging process, but it is possible with time, self-compassion, and support. Therapy can be an invaluable resource, providing the empath with the tools to process trauma, rebuild their self-esteem, and develop healthier relationship patterns. Support groups can also offer validation and connection with others who have experienced similar forms of manipulation. Most importantly, the empath must learn to prioritize their own needs and emotional well-being. This means engaging in self-care, setting healthy boundaries, and surrounding themselves with people who respect and value them. By focusing on their healing journey, the empath can break free from the narcissist's cycle of revaluation and reclaim their sense of self. In the end, the narcissist's revaluation is not a reflection of the empath's worth. It is a testament to their strength and resilience. The narcissist may always seek to return, but the empath has the power to say no and choose a future free from manipulation and abuse. True healing begins when the empath realizes that they are whole, worthy, and deserving of a love that does not require them to suffer. When the narcissist revalues the empath, the emotional manipulation intensifies, and the empath often finds themselves trapped in a psychological maze. This stage of the relationship is particularly insidious because the narcissist's tactics become more refined and difficult to recognize. The empath, still yearning for genuine connection and closure, may be pulled deeper into the narcissist's web, believing that this time things will be different. However, the truth remains that the narcissist's motivations are never rooted in love. They are driven by an unquenchable need for control and validation. One of the most deceptive aspects of the revaluation phase is the false transformation the narcissist presents. When the narcissist returns after the discard, they often portray themselves as changed individuals. They may acknowledge past mistakes, express deep regret, and offer promises of a better future. For the empath, these gestures can feel like long-awaited proof that the narcissist is capable of genuine love. However, this illusion of change is a carefully calculated facade designed to disarm the empath's defenses and re-establish control. The narcissist's apparent vulnerability during this phase is particularly convincing. They might share personal struggles or past traumas, painting themselves as misunderstood victims. This tactic is a form of pity play, which manipulates the empath's natural compassion. By eliciting sympathy, the narcissist shifts the focus away from their harmful behavior and onto their supposed suffering. The empath, driven by a desire to help and heal, becomes more likely to forgive and re-engage. Another manipulation strategy the narcissist employs is love bombing 2.0, a renewed version of the idealization phase. This time, however, the love bombing is even more intense because the narcissist senses that the empath may be more resistant after the discard. The narcissist may shower the empath with affection, attention, and grand romantic gestures. They might say things like, "I've realized you're the love of my life," or "I can't live without you." This overwhelming display of love is designed to reignite the emotional bond and erase the pain caused by the discard. For the empath, these emotional highs can be intoxicating. After enduring the pain of rejection, the narcissist's sudden affection feels like emotional relief. This creates a dangerous trauma-reward loop, where the empath becomes addicted to the narcissist's validation. The emotional relief is temporary, but it strengthens the empath's hope that the relationship can be salvaged. Unfortunately, this hope blinds the empath to the reality that the narcissist's actions are part of a cyclical pattern, not genuine change. The narcissist also uses selective amnesia during the revaluation phase to rewrite the history of the relationship. They may downplay or deny the harm they caused during the discard, reframing the narrative to cast themselves in a sympathetic light. Statements like, "I was going through a tough time," or "I never meant to hurt you," serve to minimize the emotional damage they inflicted. This gaslighting tactic causes the empath to question their own reality and doubt the validity of their pain. One of the most psychologically damaging aspects of the revaluation phase is the deferred apology. While the narcissist may appear to take responsibility for their actions, their apologies are often vague and lack true accountability. Phrases like, "I'm sorry if I hurt you," or "I didn't realize how much you cared," shift blame onto the empath's emotional response rather than acknowledging the narcissist's abusive behavior. This type of apology leaves the empath longing for deeper accountability, keeping them emotionally invested in the hope that true change will come. To further entangle the empath, the narcissist may introduce future faking 2.0, promising an even grander vision of the future together. They might speak about marriage, starting a family, or building a life filled with shared dreams. These promises are not made with genuine intention but are crafted to keep the empath emotionally tethered. By dangling the possibility of a perfect future, the narcissist exploits the empath's desire for stability and emotional connection. Another weapon in the narcissist's arsenal during revaluation is jealousy induction. If the narcissist has been involved with a new partner during the discard, they may subtly reference their experiences to evoke feelings of insecurity. Conversely, they might suggest that they left the new partner because no one compares to the empath. This tactic simultaneously undermines the empath's confidence while reinforcing the belief that they are uniquely special to the narcissist. This emotional manipulation deepens the empath's attachment while keeping them off balance. For the empath, the emotional confusion is amplified by the repetition compulsion, a psychological drive to resolve past trauma by recreating it in the present. Many empaths, especially those with unresolved childhood wounds, become trapped in this cycle as they attempt to fix the narcissist and earn the love they never received. The narcissist exploits this unconscious drive by offering fleeting moments of affection followed by emotional withdrawal, perpetuating the empath's need to prove their worth. The empath's fear of abandonment is another critical factor that keeps them trapped in the revaluation cycle. The narcissist often threatens, either directly or subtly, to leave if the empath does not comply with their demands. This creates a heightened sense of anxiety, making the empath more willing to tolerate abusive behavior to avoid being discarded again. The narcissist leverages this fear to maintain control, ensuring that the empath remains emotionally dependent. Breaking free from the revaluation phase requires the empath to recognize that the narcissist's behavior is a predictable pattern, not an indication of love or change. The first step is to detach emotionally and observe the narcissist's actions without idealizing their intentions. This means recognizing that the narcissist's words and promises are tools of manipulation rather than genuine expressions of care. Implementing no contact remains the most effective strategy for breaking the cycle. By cutting off all communication, the empath can protect themselves from further emotional manipulation and begin the healing process. If no contact is not possible due to shared obligations, practicing low-contact strategies such as limiting conversations to practical matters and avoiding emotional engagement can help minimize the narcissist's influence. Healing from the trauma of narcissistic revaluation requires the empath to rebuild their self-worth outside the narcissistic relationship. This means focusing on self-care, seeking therapy, and surrounding themselves with supportive and validating relationships. Therapy, particularly trauma-informed approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, can help the empath process emotional wounds and reclaim their sense of identity. A crucial part of the healing journey involves reclaiming one's narrative. The narcissist's manipulation often distorts the empath's perception of reality, leaving them feeling powerless. By journaling, engaging in creative expression, or sharing their story in safe spaces, the empath can begin to piece together a truthful account of their experiences. This process of narrative reclamation restores agency and helps the empath understand that they are not to blame for the abuse they endured. Ultimately, the narcissist's revaluation is not a reflection of the empath's worth. It is a testament to the narcissist's insatiable need for power. The empath's strength lies in their ability to recognize the manipulation for what it is and choose a different path. True healing occurs when the empath realizes that they deserve a relationship built on genuine love, respect, and mutual care, qualities that no narcissist can ever truly provide. By breaking free from the narcissist's revaluation cycle, the empath can reclaim their freedom and create a life where they are no longer defined by someone else's brokenness. In doing so, they discover that their worth has never been dependent on the narcissist's approval, but has always existed within themselves. Part 6. As the revaluation phase continues, the narcissist's tactics become increasingly insidious, and the emotional turmoil for the empath deepens. The narcissist's ability to switch between charm and cruelty creates a psychological trap that keeps the empath emotionally entangled. This phase is not about genuine reconciliation. It is about reasserting control and ensuring the empath remains a reliable source of narcissistic supply. To understand the devastating effects of this cycle, it is essential to explore the narcissist's motivations, the psychological impact on the empath, and the steps required to break free from this manipulative dynamic. At the core of the narcissist's behavior during the revaluation phase is emotional extraction. The narcissist views relationships as transactional, and their primary goal is to extract as much emotional energy as possible from the empath. This energy, often called narcissistic supply, comes in many forms, including admiration, emotional reactions, and attention. The empath's compassion, loyalty, and emotional depth make them a prime target because they are more likely to tolerate mistreatment while continuing to offer emotional support. One of the most effective tools the narcissist uses during revaluation is emotional triangulation. This involves introducing a third party, such as an ex-partner, a new romantic interest, or even a friend, to create jealousy and insecurity. The narcissist may subtly compare the empath to this third party, suggesting that others are more desirable or understanding. This manipulation is designed to destabilize the empath's sense of security and provoke an emotional response, which the narcissist interprets as a sign of their continued control. For example, the narcissist might say, "My ex never made such a big deal out of things," or "I've been spending time with someone who really gets me." These statements are not accidental. They are deliberate attempts to make the empath feel inadequate and fearful of being replaced. This tactic keeps the empath on edge, making them work harder to regain the narcissist's approval and avoid being discarded again. Another damaging manipulation technique during revaluation is hot and cold behavior. The narcissist alternates between warmth and indifference, creating an unpredictable emotional environment. One day, they might shower the empath with affection and attention, only to become distant and dismissive the next. This inconsistency is not random. It is a calculated strategy designed to keep the empath emotionally invested. The unpredictability fuels the empath's anxiety and creates a psychological craving for the rare moments of affection. This emotional roller coaster activates the brain's reward system. Just as a gambler becomes addicted to the unpredictable nature of a slot machine, the empath becomes addicted to the narcissist's inconsistent affection. The brain releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure, whenever the narcissist offers kindness or attention. This chemical reinforcement makes it incredibly difficult for the empath to break free, even when they recognize the relationship is harmful. In addition to emotional manipulation, the narcissist often engages in blame shifting during the revaluation phase. Rather than taking responsibility for their actions, the narcissist projects their faults onto the empath. They may accuse the empath of being too sensitive, needy, or controlling. This gaslighting technique distorts reality and causes the empath to question their own perceptions. By shifting the blame, the narcissist avoids accountability while making the empath feel responsible for the relationship's dysfunction. For instance, if the empath confronts the narcissist about their hurtful behavior, the narcissist might respond with statements like, "You're always overreacting," or "If you weren't so emotional, we wouldn't have these problems." These responses invalidate the empath's feelings and create a sense of learned helplessness, a psychological state where the empath feels powerless to change the situation. Over time, this erosion of self-confidence makes the empath more susceptible to further manipulation. The narcissist also employs hoovering, a term derived from the vacuum cleaner brand, to pull the empath back into the relationship after any attempt to break free. Hoovering tactics can range from subtle emotional appeals to dramatic gestures. The narcissist may send sentimental messages, such as, "I can't stop thinking about you," or "I miss the way things used to be." Alternatively, they might fabricate crises, like a health scare or a personal emergency, to elicit the empath's sympathy and re-establish contact. These hoovering attempts are not rooted in genuine care but in the narcissist's fear of losing control. When the empath begins to distance themselves, the narcissist feels a loss of power, which triggers a desperate need to pull them back. Each successful hoover reinforces the narcissist's belief that they can return at any time and reclaim their emotional supply. For the empath, the emotional consequences of the revaluation phase are profound. The constant manipulation leads to emotional exhaustion, a state of chronic fatigue caused by prolonged psychological stress. This exhaustion affects every aspect of the empath's life, impairing their ability to think clearly, make decisions, and maintain other relationships. Many empaths report feeling trapped in a fog of confusion, unsure of their own thoughts and feelings. Another devastating consequence is the loss of identity. The narcissist's manipulation gradually strips the empath of their sense of self. The empath may begin to define their worth solely through the narcissist's approval, losing touch with their own desires, values, and goals. This identity erosion makes it difficult to imagine life outside the relationship, reinforcing the belief that they cannot survive without the narcissist. The narcissist's revaluation also fosters a sense of emotional isolation. The empath, consumed by the relationship's turmoil, often withdraws from friends and family. This isolation is exacerbated by the narcissist's efforts to undermine external support systems. They may speak negatively about the empath's loved ones, creating conflict and further distancing the empath from sources of validation and support. Escaping the narcissist's revaluation requires a deliberate and courageous commitment to self-liberation. The first step is to recognize that the narcissist's behavior is not a reflection of the empath's worth. It is a manifestation of the narcissist's deep-seated insecurities and need for control. By understanding the manipulative tactics at play, the empath can begin to reclaim their power and dismantle the psychological chains that bind them. Implementing no contact remains the most effective strategy for breaking free. This means cutting off all communication, no messages, calls, or social media engagement. No contact disrupts the narcissist's ability to manipulate and provides the empath with the emotional space needed to heal. If no contact is not feasible, low contact boundaries, such as limiting conversations to necessary logistics, can help minimize emotional entanglement. Healing from narcissistic revaluation also involves rebuilding self-identity. The empath must reconnect with their authentic self by engaging in activities that bring joy, fulfillment, and a sense of purpose. Journaling, therapy, and self-reflection can help the empath process their experiences and rediscover their intrinsic worth. Therapeutic support is invaluable during this healing journey. Trauma-informed therapy, including modalities like internal family systems, IFS, and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, can address the psychological wounds inflicted by narcissistic abuse. Support groups offer a sense of community and validation, reminding the empath that they are not alone in their healing journey. Ultimately, the empath's path to freedom lies in reclaiming their narrative and refusing to be defined by the narcissist's manipulation. True healing is not just about escaping the narcissist. It is about rediscovering self-love, building healthy boundaries, and embracing a life where emotional abuse has no place. By choosing to break free, the empath affirms their inherent worth and paves the way for a future grounded in love, authenticity, and emotional freedom. In doing so, they not only reclaim their identity but also embody the truth that no one, no matter how manipulative, has the power to define their value or dictate their destiny. When the narcissist revalues the empath, the psychological effects on the empath deepen, creating an even stronger emotional entanglement. At this stage, the narcissist's manipulation becomes more complex, blending moments of affection with subtle forms of control. This confusing dynamic keeps the empath in a cycle of hope and despair, making it increasingly difficult to break free. The revaluation phase is not about love or reconciliation. It is about maintaining dominance and securing a steady flow of narcissistic supply. To fully grasp the destructive nature of this cycle, it is crucial to explore the narcissist's advanced manipulation tactics, the psychological toll on the empath, and the strategies required for true liberation. One of the most insidious tactics used during the revaluation phase is emotional mirroring. The narcissist studies the empath's personality, values, and desires to reflect these qualities back to them. This tactic is particularly effective because it creates the illusion of a deep emotional connection. The empath, longing to be understood, feels an intense bond with the narcissist, believing they have found someone who truly gets them. However, this mirroring is not a sign of genuine intimacy. It is a calculated strategy to disarm the empath and deepen their emotional dependence. For example, if the empath values kindness and generosity, the narcissist will initially display these traits to gain their trust. If the empath dreams of a particular future, such as marriage, travel, or building a family, the narcissist will echo these desires, promising to fulfill them. This mirroring makes the empath feel seen and understood, but over time, the narcissist's true nature emerges. The empath may notice subtle contradictions between the narcissist's words and actions, but by this point, the emotional bond is so strong that the empath struggles to accept the truth. Another powerful manipulation tool is intermittent reinforcement. This psychological tactic involves delivering rewards sporadically and unpredictably. The narcissist alternates between affection and cruelty, creating a cycle where the empath becomes addicted to the fleeting moments of kindness. This pattern mirrors the dynamics of gambling, where the uncertainty of reward intensifies the emotional investment. The empath becomes trapped, constantly chasing the next moment of validation while enduring prolonged periods of emotional neglect or abuse. Intermittent reinforcement is especially damaging because it conditions the empath to tolerate mistreatment. Instead of recognizing the abuse, the empath focuses on the rare instances of kindness, interpreting them as signs of love or change. This cognitive distortion strengthens the trauma bond, making it difficult for the empath to leave the relationship. Even when the narcissist's behavior is blatantly harmful, the memory of past affection keeps the empath hopeful that things will improve. During revaluation, the narcissist also employs identity erosion, a gradual process of undermining the empath's sense of self. This tactic involves constant criticism, subtle insults, and invalidation of the empath's thoughts and feelings. Over time, the empath begins to internalize these negative messages, leading to a profound loss of self-confidence. The narcissist might say things like, "You're too emotional. No one else would put up with you," or "You'll never find someone better." These statements chip away at the empath's self-worth, making them feel unlovable and dependent on the narcissist's approval. The emotional exhaustion caused by identity erosion often leads to decision paralysis. The empath, overwhelmed by self-doubt and confusion, struggles to make even basic decisions without seeking the narcissist's guidance. This dynamic further entrenches the power imbalance, as the empath becomes increasingly reliant on the narcissist for validation and direction. The loss of autonomy makes it even harder to imagine a life outside the relationship, reinforcing the belief that escape is impossible. Another hallmark of the revaluation phase is emotional invalidation. The narcissist systematically dismisses the empath's feelings, experiences, and perceptions. When the empath expresses hurt or concern, the narcissist may respond with statements like, "You're overreacting," "That never happened," or "You're too sensitive." This gaslighting tactic causes the empath to question their reality, eroding their ability to trust their own judgment. Over time, the empath may become so conditioned to seek the narcissist's version of reality that they lose touch with their inner truth. To maintain control, the narcissist often uses fear-based manipulation. This tactic involves subtle or overt threats designed to keep the empath compliant. For instance, the narcissist might imply that they will abandon the empath if their demands are not met, or suggest that the empath will never find happiness without them. This manipulation exploits the empath's fear of abandonment, reinforcing their emotional dependence. In some cases, the narcissist may escalate to emotional blackmail, using guilt, shame, or fear to control the empath's behavior. They might say things like, "If you loved me, you'd do this for me," or "You're selfish for wanting to leave." These statements manipulate the empath's empathy, making them feel responsible for the narcissist's emotional well-being. This guilt-based control keeps the empath trapped, even when they recognize the toxicity of the relationship. Despite the overwhelming pain, many empaths remain in the revaluation phase due to hope addiction. The narcissist's occasional acts of kindness create a powerful sense of longing for the relationship's early days. The empath clings to the belief that the narcissist can change, or that their love will eventually be reciprocated. This hope, though understandable, is a form of self-deception that prolongs the cycle of abuse. Breaking free from the revaluation phase requires the empath to confront the painful truth. The narcissist's behavior is not love, it is manipulation. Genuine love does not involve control, emotional harm, or intentional deception. By accepting this reality, the empath can begin to dismantle the psychological chains that bind them. One of the most effective steps toward freedom is to implement emotional detachment. This means recognizing that the narcissist's actions are not a reflection of the empath's worth. Emotional detachment allows the empath to observe the narcissist's behavior objectively, without internalizing their manipulation. This mental shift is crucial for reclaiming personal power and restoring self-confidence. Establishing no contact remains the gold standard for breaking free from narcissistic abuse. This involves severing all forms of communication: no texts, calls, social media interactions, or in-person meetings. No contact disrupts the narcissist's ability to manipulate and provides the empath with the space needed to heal. If no contact is not feasible due to shared responsibilities, gray rocking, offering only minimal, unemotional responses, can reduce the narcissist's ability to provoke a reaction. Healing from the trauma of revaluation requires rebuilding identity. The empath must reconnect with their authentic self by rediscovering their values, passions, and strengths. Engaging in self-care practices, such as therapy, mindfulness, and creative expression, can help the empath process their experiences and reclaim their sense of self. Therapeutic approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, can be particularly effective in addressing the emotional wounds caused by narcissistic abuse. These evidence-based therapies help the empath reframe negative beliefs, process traumatic memories, and develop healthier relational patterns. Surrounding oneself with supportive relationships is also vital for healing. Trusted friends, family members, and support groups provide validation and encouragement, helping the empath break free from the isolation imposed by the narcissist. Connecting with others who have experienced similar abuse can offer comfort and remind the empath that they are not alone. Ultimately, true freedom comes when the empath recognizes their inherent worth and refuses to accept anything less than genuine love and respect. By choosing to walk away from the narcissist's manipulation, the empath affirms their right to emotional safety and personal autonomy. In doing so, they reclaim their power and create a future where they are no longer defined by someone else's brokenness. Healing from narcissistic abuse is not an easy journey, but it is a profoundly liberating one. With time, self-compassion, and intentional healing, the empath can break free from the revaluation cycle and embrace a life rooted in authenticity, self-love, and emotional freedom. As the revaluation phase intensifies, the narcissist's manipulation becomes more calculated, exploiting the empath's deepest emotional vulnerabilities. This phase is not about love or reconciliation. It is a continuation of the narcissist's need to dominate, control, and extract emotional energy. For the empath, the psychological effects grow more profound as the lines between reality and the narcissist's manufactured narrative blur. Understanding the advanced manipulation tactics at play, the emotional consequences on the empath, and the steps toward true liberation is crucial for breaking free from this toxic cycle. One of the most destructive tactics the narcissist uses during revaluation is future faking, making false promises about a better future to keep the empath hooked. These promises might include commitments to marriage, starting a family, or achieving shared dreams. The narcissist dangles these fantasies in front of the empath, offering hope that the relationship will eventually transform into the ideal partnership the empath longs for. However, these promises are rarely fulfilled. Instead, they serve as a powerful tool to maintain control and prevent the empath from leaving. For example, if the empath expresses dissatisfaction or considers leaving, the narcissist may suddenly promise to change. They might say things like, "I'll go to therapy," or "Let's start planning our future together." These promises are designed to disarm the empath's doubts and rekindle their hope. Yet, as soon as the empath recommits to the relationship, the narcissist returns to their old patterns of emotional neglect and manipulation. The unpredictability created by future faking strengthens the trauma bond, a powerful emotional attachment formed through cycles of abuse and intermittent kindness. The empath becomes trapped in a psychological loop where they crave the promised future while enduring present-day mistreatment. This emotional entanglement makes it incredibly challenging to recognize the narcissist's true intentions or to prioritize their own well-being. Another powerful manipulation strategy the narcissist employs is reverse projection. This involves accusing the empath of behaviors or intentions that actually reflect the narcissist's own actions. If the narcissist is being dishonest, for example, they may accuse the empath of lying. If they are emotionally withdrawing, they may claim the empath is distant or uncaring. This tactic shifts the focus away from the narcissist's toxic behavior and places the empath on the defensive. Reverse projection serves multiple purposes. First, it creates confusion and self-doubt, causing the empath to question their own perceptions. Second, it allows the narcissist to avoid accountability by redirecting blame. Lastly, it fosters an environment where the empath feels compelled to prove their loyalty and innocence, further deepening their emotional investment in the relationship. A particularly damaging form of reverse projection is character assassination, a systematic effort to undermine the empath's reputation and self-image. The narcissist may spread false narratives to mutual friends, family members, or even colleagues, portraying the empath as unstable, selfish, or manipulative. This smear campaign isolates the empath from their support network, making it harder for them to seek help or validation. During the revaluation phase, the narcissist also intensifies emotional withdrawal, withholding affection, communication, and intimacy to punish and control the empath. This tactic creates a profound sense of emotional starvation. The empath, desperate for connection, works harder to regain the narcissist's affection, often at the expense of their own needs and boundaries. This dynamic reinforces the power imbalance, as the empath becomes increasingly dependent on the narcissist's rare moments of warmth. Emotional withdrawal is often paired with silent treatment, a form of psychological punishment where the narcissist ignores or stonewalls the empath. This cold indifference triggers feelings of abandonment and worthlessness, particularly in individuals with a heightened sensitivity to rejection. The empath may interpret the silence as a sign that they are unworthy or unlovable, reinforcing the belief that they must change or improve to regain the narcissist's attention. The psychological toll of prolonged emotional withdrawal is significant. The empath may experience emotional dysregulation, an inability to manage or stabilize their emotions. This can manifest as anxiety, depression, and obsessive rumination about the relationship. Over time, the empath's mental and emotional resources become depleted, leaving them feeling trapped and powerless. Another devastating consequence of the revaluation phase is the gradual loss of personal identity. The narcissist's constant invalidation and criticism cause the empath to internalize a false narrative about themselves. They may begin to see themselves through the narcissist's distorted lens, believing they are inherently flawed, unworthy, or incapable of happiness outside the relationship. This identity erosion makes it even harder to envision a life of autonomy and self-love. To maintain control, the narcissist may also engage in breadcrumbing, offering small, inconsistent gestures of affection to keep the empath emotionally invested. These crumbs of attention, though minimal, provide just enough hope to prevent the empath from walking away. Breadcrumbing is particularly effective because it exploits the empath's longing for validation and the belief that the narcissist's affection signifies genuine care. For instance, after days or weeks of emotional withdrawal, the narcissist might send a simple message like, "I miss you," or "thinking of you." To an outsider, these gestures may seem insignificant, but to the empath, they represent a lifeline, a sign that the narcissist still cares and that reconciliation is possible. This intermittent affection reinforces the trauma bond and prolongs the cycle of emotional dependency. Breaking free from the narcissist's revaluation requires a radical shift in mindset and a commitment to self-liberation. The first and most crucial step is accepting the reality of the relationship, understanding that the narcissist's behavior is not an expression of love, but a mechanism of control. This acceptance allows the empath to dismantle the illusions and false hopes that keep them trapped. Implementing no contact remains the most effective strategy for breaking the cycle. By severing all forms of communication, the empath disrupts the narcissist's ability to manipulate and creates the emotional space needed for healing. If complete no contact is not possible due to shared responsibilities, establishing firm boundaries, such as limiting conversations to essential matters, can help minimize emotional entanglement. Healing also requires rebuilding self-worth, reclaiming the sense of identity and value that the narcissist systematically eroded. This process involves reconnecting with personal passions, fostering supportive relationships, and engaging in activities that affirm the empath's intrinsic worth. Therapy can be a transformative tool, particularly modalities that address trauma, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR. Another essential aspect of healing is reclaiming personal power. The empath must recognize that they have the right to emotional safety, respect, and autonomy. This empowerment comes through practicing self-compassion, enforcing boundaries, and challenging the internalized narratives imposed by the narcissist. Support networks play a critical role in the recovery process. Connecting with others who have experienced narcissistic abuse provides validation, guidance, and a sense of community. Online forums, support groups, and trauma-informed therapists can offer valuable resources for navigating the complexities of healing. Ultimately, true freedom comes when the empath chooses to prioritize their own well-being over the narcissist's demands. This decision is not an act of selfishness. It is an affirmation of self-love and a declaration that they deserve a life free from manipulation and emotional harm. By breaking free from the revaluation phase, the empath reclaims their identity, restores their emotional health, and opens the door to authentic, nurturing relationships. This journey is not easy, but it is a profound act of self-respect, a testament to the empath's resilience and their unwavering right to a life of dignity and love. As the narcissist continues the revaluation phase, the empath remains trapped in a complex emotional web. The push-pull dynamic creates a confusing mixture of hope, fear, and self-doubt. Each fleeting moment of kindness from the narcissist renews the empath's belief that change is possible, while the inevitable return to manipulation leaves them feeling powerless. To fully break free, the empath must understand the deeper psychological mechanisms at play, the long-term impact of staying in the cycle, and the transformative steps required to reclaim their freedom. One of the most powerful psychological forces keeping the empath stuck is cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort caused by holding two contradictory beliefs. On one hand, the empath remembers the love-bombing phase, where the narcissist seemed kind, attentive, and devoted. On the other, they experience ongoing emotional manipulation and neglect. This internal conflict makes it difficult for the empath to accept the reality of the situation. Instead of recognizing the narcissist's abusive behavior, they rationalize it, hoping that the good version of the narcissist will eventually return. Cognitive dissonance is especially intense when the narcissist uses selective affection, offering small moments of warmth to counterbalance their cruelty. For instance, after a prolonged silent treatment, the narcissist might suddenly express affection with a thoughtful message or a romantic gesture. This intermittent kindness reinforces the empath's belief that the narcissist is capable of change, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. The empath clings to these moments, convincing themselves that the pain is temporary and that enduring the abuse will eventually lead to a loving relationship. This distorted reality is further reinforced by gaslighting, a manipulation tactic where the narcissist denies, distorts, or rewrites past events. If the empath confronts the narcissist about their hurtful behavior, they are often met with phrases like, "You're imagining things, I never said that," or "You're too sensitive." Over time, the empath begins to question their memory, judgment, and even sanity. This systematic undermining of reality deepens their dependence on the narcissist for validation and truth. The psychological effects of prolonged gaslighting are profound. The empath may develop learned helplessness, a state where they believe they are powerless to change their situation. Each attempt to assert boundaries or seek emotional clarity is met with denial, blame, or retaliation. Eventually, the empath stops trying to defend themselves, accepting the narcissist's version of reality as their own. This psychological captivity makes leaving the relationship feel not only impossible but also futile. Another factor that binds the empath to the narcissist is emotional exhaustion. The constant cycles of idealization, devaluation, and revaluation drain the empath's mental and emotional resources. They become so consumed by the relationship's turmoil that they neglect their own needs, dreams, and identity. This state of depletion makes it difficult to find the energy to resist or escape. The empath's world becomes centered on the narcissist's moods and demands, leaving little room for self-care or independent thought. In addition to emotional exhaustion, the empath often experiences isolation. Narcissists deliberately undermine the empath's support systems, either by causing conflict with friends and family or by discouraging outside relationships altogether. This isolation increases the empath's dependence on the narcissist for social and emotional connection. Without a support network to offer alternative perspectives, the empath becomes more vulnerable to the narcissist's manipulation. To maintain control, the narcissist may also engage in hoovering, an attempt to pull the empath back into the relationship after they try to leave. This can take many forms: dramatic apologies, declarations of love, or promises to change. The narcissist may also exploit crises, such as a health issue or financial struggle, to trigger the empath's compassion. Hoovering is highly effective because it taps into the empath's desire to heal and nurture others. Each time the empath returns, the trauma bond strengthens, making future attempts to leave even harder. Breaking free from this cycle requires emotional clarity, a conscious decision to view the narcissist's actions through the lens of truth rather than hope. The empath must acknowledge that the narcissist's behavior is not an expression of love, but a form of emotional exploitation. Genuine love is consistent, kind, and respectful, qualities that narcissists by nature cannot sustain. One of the most empowering steps toward freedom is detaching from the narcissist's validation. The empath must recognize that their worth is not defined by the narcissist's approval. This mental shift allows the empath to reclaim their identity and restore their self-esteem. By seeking internal validation rather than external affirmation, the empath can begin to dismantle the psychological chains that bind them. Implementing no contact remains the most effective strategy for breaking free. This means cutting off all communication. No calls, texts, emails, or social media interactions. No contact prevents the narcissist from continuing their manipulation and provides the empath with the space needed to heal. If no contact is not feasible, low contact, limiting communication to essential matters only, can also be effective in reducing emotional entanglement. Healing from narcissistic abuse requires reclaiming personal identity. Over time, the empath has often lost touch with their values, passions, and sense of self. Engaging in self-discovery practices, such as journaling, therapy, and creative expression, can help the empath reconnect with their authentic identity. This process involves exploring who they are outside the relationship and embracing their inherent worth. Therapeutic support can be invaluable in the healing journey. Modalities like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, help the empath identify and reframe distorted beliefs, while eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, can address trauma stored in the nervous system. Working with a trauma-informed therapist provides a safe space to process the emotional wounds inflicted by the narcissist and develop healthier relational patterns. Establishing boundaries is another crucial aspect of recovery. For many empaths, the relationship with a narcissist involved a consistent erosion of personal limits. Learning to assert and protect their boundaries is an empowering act of self-respect. This might mean saying no without guilt, recognizing emotional manipulation, and prioritizing their own needs over the narcissist's demands. Surrounding oneself with supportive relationships is essential for long-term healing. Trusted friends, family members, and support groups offer the validation and encouragement that the empath was denied during the relationship. Connecting with others who have experienced similar abuse helps the empath feel seen, heard, and understood. This sense of community plays a vital role in rebuilding trust and emotional safety. Another key element of healing is self-compassion. The empath must release feelings of shame and self-blame for staying in the relationship. Narcissistic abuse is designed to be disorienting and all-consuming. Escaping it requires immense courage and inner strength. By practicing kindness toward themselves and recognizing their resilience, the empath can begin to heal from the emotional damage. Ultimately, true freedom comes when the empath chooses to reclaim their power and autonomy. This decision involves accepting that the narcissist will never change and that their own happiness cannot be found within the abusive dynamic. By walking away from the cycle of revaluation, the empath affirms their right to a life of dignity, peace, and authentic connection. The journey toward healing is not linear, but with time and intentional self-care, the empath can break free and thrive. They can rediscover their identity, cultivate healthy relationships, and build a future where their worth is no longer defined by another's brokenness. This path of healing is a profound act of self-love, a testament to the empath's strength, courage, and enduring capacity for hope.